Hi, welcome to Biospaces the Weekly. Q1 earnings continue to roll in from big pharmas like Eli Lilly and Amgen, and smaller biotechs like Sarepta and Amylyx, which both have key catalysts ahead this year. The FDA named an interim CBER director last week as Vinay Prasad's tumultuous tenure finally came to a close. Meanwhile, the agency held its first advisory committee meeting in 9 months, and it was missing the quote, Pasteur moment. And the ALS R&D space is experiencing somewhat of a renaissance as two companies, Curalys and Corcept, report positive results for their mid-stage candidates. Let's dive in.
All right, week 2 of earnings. How are we all doing?
I feel like I've been through it this morning. Pfizer was like unexpectedly, I was scrambling at the end there to get that finished. It was a little wild.
Pfizer was a little tame this year, weren't they? As
were,
opposed to
yeah.
wild.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it, so I won't give it all away up front. But yeah, they were a little tame. I think what's kind of throwing me this season is like we had so much concentrated last week, and then now there's just like a couple. Like we had Pfizer today, we've got Novo on Wednesday, tomorrow. Like I don't know, it's been a weird season.
And if there isn't that obvious headline, it can just feel like a little bit of a drag going through all those numbers. So yeah, a boring earnings call doesn't make for a quick turnaround.
Let's get to it. Let's get to intros. So I will start off this week. I am Heather McKenzie. I'm a senior editor at Biospace, and I curate Clinicaspace, which comes to hopefully all of your inboxes on Mondays.
And I am Annalee Armstrong. I am senior editor at Biospace, and I put together the BioPharm Executive newsletter every week, which goes out on Wednesday mornings.
And I'm Jeff Axe, managing editor, and always putting in some plugs for our other newsletters. Definitely sign up for our daily gene pool, as well as Manufacturing Brief on Tuesdays and Career Insider on Thursdays.
Gene pool has been packed lately with earnings, so let's get to that. So Q1 earnings reports continue to roll in. Pfizer, Vertex, Eli Lilly, and many more big pharmas have announced in the past week, but also the little guys. These are the ones that I like to follow. The small to medium biotechs are beginning to report as well. But Annalee, let's start with Pfizer since they're the freshest in your mind.
You guys know I love earnings. It is like my favorite time of year, and it happens 4 times. It's like a holiday every quarter. So yeah, Pfizer was this morning. I literally just filed that story, and we got it published before we jumped on this podcast. It was a good quarter for Pfizer. They definitely beat expectations, but analysts were like really basically fussing about the fact that they didn't raise guidance for the year. They argued that, they had a great quarter. They had, 2% growth. They beat consensus estimates and everything, but they still did not raise guidance. This almost like muted the shares. Like Pfizer didn't really, they didn't really move very much. But basically what executive said on the call is their CFO, Dave Denton, was like, he's a pretty conservative guy. He doesn't like to raise guidance in the first quarter. He also said that because their COVID products are so back heavy, they typically make most of their money in the second half. He just doesn't want to raise guidance and get people's hopes up. So basically, they've really paved the way for a strong year with this quarter. They didn't really say whether they would raise their guidance for the rest of the year, but I think it seemed to satisfy analysts, even if they were still just kind of hoping to see those numbers go up.
I have a lot of respect for that approach. Like we've had examples of companies overshooting either in guidances for earnings, but also, weight loss expectations. And why overshoot? Be conservative and then impress everyone when you beat it. That seems like the way to go.
Yeah, no kidding. And Pfizer is kind of in this weird period, which was basically the highlight of this earnings call. While they did do that 2% growth for the quarter, they're really eyeing like a more significant return to growth in the 2029 period and beyond. So that's really what they laid out in this earnings period and on the call. So they recently received some clarity in the form of a litigation settlement for the patent on Vyndamax, which is for ATTR amyloidosis. Heather, you probably can pronounce this a lot better than I can.
Amyloidosis? That's amyloidosis.
And specifically cardiomyopathy.
Yes.
Of ATTR amyloidosis.
Yes. So now they kind of have certainty that they were going to lose the patent exclusivity on this product. However, with this settlement, that's going to happen in 2031 instead of 2028. So that gives them an extra 3 years of exclusivity. And as Albert Bourla said on the call, this is a $6 billion product for them. So that is like all extra bonus that's coming into Pfizer's pocket.
So what are they going to spend it on?
I mean, M&A, of course. They have definitely added some of that pile to their war chest for deals. Analysts were really trying to get some more details from Borla and the team on what exactly they are looking for in deals. Borla kind of dodged the question a little bit. However, he did say that they are looking at everything and kind of gave the never say never answer that a lot of CEOs give. Did not rule out a mega deal, but said that they're really focused on streamlining the business right now, particularly with AI. So any kind of mega transformative deal like that would kind of make that process more difficult.
Pfizer had one of last year's mega deals for Metsera, so maybe they're done for a little while, or maybe not.
Yeah, and like that deal was $10 billion, which is still pretty big by today's M&A standards, but it was really a transformative one for Pfizer, and that is going to be key to the 2029 period and beyond. So that was something that they told analysts as well.
Yeah, I noticed with the story you just put up, you called it a 2029 story for Pfizer.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
so that's okay. Well, moving on to one of our favorite companies to discuss on this show, Eli Lilly.
Yeah, it was a huge quarter for Lilly. Whereas Pfizer was kind of this muted story, Lilly was the exact opposite, which was to be expected. They reported growth of 56% for a total of $19.8 billion in revenue, which is absolutely insane. Analysts all around were very pleased with this result. I kind of could not stop getting hung up on one key thing from their earnings, though, which is that throughout their earnings release, Lilly was saying that their revenue could have been higher had they not lowered prices significantly on a lot of their medications. This is something they did throughout 2025, and now that's starting to hit earnings.
Would they really, though? Because the idea is you charge less, you sell more of it. So it's hard to tell whether they would actually have made less. They would not have sold as much as they did probably if prices hadn't started to come down.
Yeah, absolutely. And they did sell more. That volume play is starting to show in earnings. But had they been charging $1,000 a month for the products, they certainly would have made more money.
Yeah. But is that possible? Can you reach that volume at that sale price? And you just can't because people can't afford that.
Right. You can. So we also got initial details from Lilly's launch of Foundeo, their oral obesity asset, which just hit the market in April. There's been kind of some mixed messaging on how many people are taking this drug, how many have switched or started taking it anew. Lilly was able to give some numbers in terms of scripts. They say that 20,000 scripts have been written so far, which is a lot. We didn't get revenue numbers on that. We won't until the second quarter, but that seemed to, again, please the analysts who are desperate for any information there.
We'll have to wait and see what those advertisements look like when they do come out.
Yeah, no kidding. And what was kind of funny is that Lilly said that they really have not done a full court press to advertise Foundeo yet. They're kind of starting with physicians, increasing familiarity to make sure that everybody knows about the product in the care setting. And then they're going to start doing those ads. So those are definitely coming to a TV near you at some point.
I saw a Zepbound on the Blue Jays mound the other day, so that was exciting. I even messaged in the group. I was like, "Hey, yeah, Zepbound's on the mound," and then I think Jeff asked me, "The guy's name is Zepbound?"
I did wonder.
So
That's
then
the
I had to
limited knowledge
explain.
of baseball I have.
And,
Yeah, they
you
have
know,
these ads. They hover over the mound, and then they change every inning.
yeah, and over in the NHL, which of course I've been watching the Stanley Cup playoffs, it's all Wegovy all the time.
I saw a ton of AbbVie advertisements at Wrigley Field this past weekend, so that caught
Yeah,
my
I
eye.
would.
We should do a listicle article of the sports and their primary
Oh,
drug
I
that
would
is being advertised.
love to do that. I mean, they each have their own weight loss drug, I guess, but
Yeah. Getting back to Lilly earnings, just to wrap things up, Lilly has been, one of the most exciting companies every single earnings period. What's been really big this past quarter, which I'm sure we'll hear about next earnings period, is that Lilly has been on an absolute M&A blitz. We had an analysis on this in BioPharm Executive last week, but of course you can still check that out at Biospace. Lilly has spent $21 billion this year already, tying their 2023 record in terms of the most transactions, with 6, and it's only the second quarter. So I can only imagine we're going to be continuing to have Lilly at the top of our website for the rest of the year.
I like that though. If you're going to make a lot of money, spend a lot of money putting it back into research for other diseases. I really like that with Lilly.
Yep, that's the goal. That's what we're all here for.
Well, we also covered Amgen last week, and they talked about their upcoming, of course, obesity drug, Maritide. And Annalee, you covered what you love to call modernings. So you can check out all those stories at Biospace. We will, of course, be covering Lilly's chief rival, Novo Nordisk, on Wednesday morning as the obesity beat continues. I'm also looking forward to Sarepta earnings tomorrow, which has a big rest of the year ahead with a study testing their immunosuppressive regimen, sirolimus, during treatment with their gene therapy Elevidys in patients with DMD who are unable to walk. And one analyst I spoke to for a biotech earnings preview piece that's out this morning, Tuesday as we record, he said that a return for Elevidys in this patient population could potentially double its revenue.
I too am curious to see where Sarepta goes. We covered them a lot last year with all the drama last summer, and there was a lot of question about whether the company would even survive. So, yes, let's see what they have to say tomorrow.
Not to mention they have they're doing a hunt for a new CEO. So I wonder if we'll hear anything else on their earnings call.
Yeah, I bet that'll definitely be a question. Well, as usual, the regulatory space has not disappointed for news this past week. We were all gearing up to find out who would replace Vinay Prasad at CBER, and then we got another interim director. That seems to be a kind of a common theme within HHS lately. But that new CBER director is Catherine Zarama.
Yeah, that's right. So we've had so much turnover at these high level positions, and they don't always have somebody lined up right away. So that seems to be the case here. They've put in Zarama as we await an announcement on who the permanent CBER director will be following Prasad. There hasn't been a great reception to this. I think just the fact that she's only an acting director and we don't have a person in the position just yet is a concern among industry watchers. People are also concerned about Zarama herself. She was handpicked by Prasad to be his deputy last December. And as Capital Alpha Partners analyst said, she and others that Prasad hired likely share his views. She does have some government experience, but she lacks the clinical experience and depth of background for a more typical FDA director, as per Capital Alpha. So we'll see what the next month or two holds. We're hoping to get a permanent director at some point pretty soon. But at this point, it really does seem like regulatory uncertainty will remain an overhang for the industry. Capital Alpha did say that perhaps we'll see less drama with Prasad gone, maybe less, quote, personnel angst, which would be good for the remaining FDA staffers. But all in all, they definitely agree that, a lot of questions remain about how CBER will be run, who will run it, and if they'll be able to restore public trust and industry trust in the agency. And then again, I'll just add too, as we started at the top of the section, there's such a high level of turnover at this position. Zarama is the fifth person to lead CBER since the beginning of the year. And, that was back when we still had Peter Marks in the position and the industry was hopeful that he would be sticking around.
Yeah, and it's not just CBER. There's been so much turnover across HHS.
Yeah. I mean, CDER and even the entire CDC have each had 5 or more leaders at the helm in the span of less than 18 months. It's just an insane amount of turnover, and the industry is really clamoring for stability.
Yeah, I know Jeff, you said since the beginning of this year. Obviously, you meant since the beginning of 2025.
Yes, thank you.
But it does all seem like it's been 1 year, doesn't it?
Yes,
One
yeah,
big
you're
long
right. It's the
year.
beginning of 2025 when Trump took office.
Well, another thing that happened at the FDA this week, they held their first advisory committee meeting in 9 months. This was for a couple of AstraZeneca cancer drugs. And I spoke with the chief medical officer at Precision for Medicine and also a former oncology regulator, Harpreet Singh. And she said that this meeting was missing the Pasteur moment. So, quote, the Pasteur moment. And this is because obviously Rick Pasteur, the longtime oncology stalwart leader, left the cancer leadership position to head up CDER, and he was one of those 5 CDER directors last year, and then he ultimately retired.
So how did that AstraZeneca AdCom go?
Yeah, so Singh said it really would have worked well as more of a conceptual discussion. So the way this was due to AstraZeneca's trial design, at least for the first drug that they discussed in the morning, the oral SERD camizestrant. And so the way that the trial was set up, patients with HER2 negative advanced breast cancer switched treatments at the point where a mutation was detected. as opposed to the current practice of changing regimens upon disease progression. And this made it a bit challenging to determine the benefit of Astra's drug.
Well, I guess now we wait and see if the FDA listens to the AdCom and what the outcome is for these two decisions.
I do hope that it's an issue that they take up. Like, this is the kind of stuff that the FDA is so good at, is like coming up with
Mhm.
these practice changing, like treatment paradigms that can really change how companies develop their drugs. So I hope that this is an issue that kind of gets debated and maybe we'll see some guidance on it at some point.
Yeah, she was. Harpreet was even suggesting that there be more of these conceptual type adcoms where they do have these kind of debates. But ultimately, it was a negative vote for chemizostrant, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, having its first AdCom in 9 months is certainly a step in the right direction. But I do know, and Heather, you can speak to this more, we're still having transparency issues at HHS.
Yeah, I think this might be about the third editorial that we at Biospace have written, checking up on Health Secretary RFK Jr.'s pledge that he made last year during his congressional hearings to prioritize, quote, radical transparency at the health department. And that's because the most recent one was driven by a couple of recent incidents where the FDA and CDC don't appear to be taking this to heart.
Yeah, what were the two that you focused on?
Yeah, well, the first, and this is one that I think is the most egregious, was the FDA's decision a couple of weeks ago to not disclose the names of its most recent Commissioner's National Priority Voucher recipients. This is for the psychedelics companies. And then the second was the CDC's, or more specifically, Jay Bhattacharya's decision not to publish a CDC partnered study that was investigating the efficacy of the COVID-19 vaccine in preventing hospitalization.
Yeah, I guess he had some concerns over the methodology, and he just said that this was normal protocol, but we don't know if we will ever. I mean, the study was published elsewhere online, and so that it
Yeah.
has seen the light of day.
Yeah, and he was mentioning, that rigor is important, and that he had issues with the methodology, and that's totally understandable. But I can kind of see just from kind of the past 18 months why people would be a little concerned that this might be a type of censorship.
Yeah, I feel like it's a perception issue as much as anything else. And in journalism, we talk all the time about conflicts of interest, and it's not just
Mm.
actual conflicts of interest, it's perceived conflicts of interest. You've got to disclose those because if people feel like you're pulling the wool over their eyes, there's going to be a trust problem there. And we know that FDA has a trust problem at this point. So even if there are justifiable reasons for some of these actions, which I'm with you, Heather. I can't really understand why they wouldn't have disclosed the name of the psychedelics makers. But even if there are reasons to not disclose what those reasons are and just to refuse to give us the information, it does it's not a good look, especially when you're preaching radical transparency.
I still go back to when McCary said that the whole reason or Prasad leaving was like always the plan. I just like feel like that was another breach of transparency. It's like, what do you mean that was the plan all along? And then you just suddenly announce his departure? Like that kind of shook the industry.
In
Absolutely.
March, about a month and a half before his actual departure.
Right.
So that would have been something good to know right at the beginning, but maybe they didn't because people wouldn't have listened to Prasad if they knew he was only temporary. I mean, there are lots of reasons that you can choose to do things, but it's not a good look.
Yeah. You need to share what those reasons are if you want to rebuild
Yeah.
trust. Well, maybe we turn to a more positive story to end this podcast. Heather, I know you've got kind of a hopeful story this week.
Yeah, well, I actually got to speak with a couple of executives from Curalis, which is an awesome name, by the way. It's pronounced Curalis, but they're trying to cure ALS, which is I think it's really cool. And I've liked their CEO, Casper Rouet, for a while, and I was like, yeah, I really wanted to do something good. So on Tuesday, they did. They presented data at Target ALS showing that their antisense drug, which is dubbed QRL-201, led to up to a 50% decrease in disease progression on a key gold standard scale for ALS physical decline. The drug also hit on key biomarkers, including neurofilament light and phosphorylated neurofilament heavy chain. Both of these are key markers of axonal damage.
So, what did the CEO have to say?
Yeah. So Casper, and I'll call him Casper because I don't quite know how to pronounce his last name, but he feels very strongly that targeting a genetic cause of ALS or a genetic contributor is the way forward. URL 201 is intended to restore the expression of the staphin 2 protein, And that's it's well known for neural repair and axonal stability. And it's also well known to be downregulated in nearly all people with ALS. Um, so he also spoke a lot about Biogen's Qalsody, which was approved in 2023. That's also an ASO, and it was one of the only bright spots in the ALS space recently, although that is starting to change.
Yeah, actually, there was also Corcept that had some new results for us recently. A little bit of mixed results, but still some positive news in there. Corcept it's not a genetic drug, it's a cortisol modulator. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, but they had a follow up extension to their phase 2 study where the phase 2 study itself missed its primary endpoint and did not show a significant effect on motor skills or other functional criteria. But the investigators noticed a survival signal there, and there was a less risk of death in the treatment arm versus the placebo arm. And that survival signal has persisted through 1 year. They saw an even stronger survival signal. And now we're at 2 years out with an 87% reduced risk of death on this drug. So the company is moving on to phase 3. Very positive news for the ALS space to have a few eggs in the basket at this point. We all know this has been a terribly devastating disease with huge unmet need and very, very little luck from the biotech side trying to treat this disease. So again, none of these are at the market's door just yet, but good to have a little bit of positive momentum in this space.
And both are moving on to phase 3. And yeah, so it's good to see momentum in ALS. It's a really devastating disease. So Annalee, BioPharm Exec, comes out Wednesday, this morning, as you're listening to this. What do we have going on this week?
I have a really fun piece from my Salt Lake City trip where I got to actually sit down with biotech founders and talk about the challenges of being a founder today. So you will get to hear their stories, how they got their first checks, and kind of how the advice that they're taking to ride out the bumps in the biotech markets right now. So just a really fun piece. It's hopeful, I promise. So you can check that out in BioPharm Executive.
Great. Well, happy to end on a hopeful note. We will see you all next week. Until then, enjoy spring.